continue with the facial section or the facial structure in terms of the bones, we're gonna see that the nasal cavity is made by not only the nasal bone but part of that maxilla, the left and the right. Right over here we have what we call the nasal spine. And I need you to be very attentive where it's located because it's very anterior. It's like a spine that's coming out from there. That's why it's called nasal spine. But if we go inside, we're gonna see the nasal septum, which is just the structure separating the left and the right nostrils. Now, that nasal septum is made of two bones. The inferior portion is made by the bomber, B-O-M-E-R, bomber, and the superior portion is part of another internal bone called the ethmoid. The ethmoid makes all the structures inside the nasal cavity and makes portion of that medial aspect of the orbital area. Now, these structures that comes out from the sides are part of the same ethmoid bone. The ethmoid bone is what gonna create all that structure inside the nasal cavity. Those areas or this kind of overgrown bone right there, right here, those are called the superior and inferior nasal conchae. So ethmoid has the superior, inferior nasal conchae, the superior portion of the nasal septum. And when we see inside the cavity, then ethmoid gonna create this structure right here where the olfactory nerve gonna pass through, and that area is called the cribriform plate. The area in the center is called the crista galli. Crista galli, cribriform plate, is where you're gonna see tiny dots or foramens. And in each of those dots that you see in there is a hole where the nerve on the olfactory comes through. Now, like I was mentioning, the nasal spine is made by the junction of the right and left maxilla. Both of them connect together, creating the nasal spine. That maxilla gets in contact right here with the zygomatic bone. The zygomatic bone has a process coming posteriorly that connects with the temporal bone. So this extra bone right here, or this process coming from the zygomatic, is called the temporal process of the zygomatic bone. And the temporal process plus the zygomatic process gonna create the zygomatic arch. It's worth mentioning that the zygomatic bone is also considered or called the cheekbones because it's in charge of the cheeks in our face. Now, here you see another foramen. That foramen is inferior to the orbit, so it's called infraorbital foramen. So you have a supraorbital, part of this frontal, and an infraorbital is in the maxilla. The maxilla, you're gonna have the left and right. You need to always refer to them to the left and right. Also, that inferior border of the orbits is made by portion of that zygomatic bone and the maxilla bone. In here we're gonna have the alveolar eminescence, and those are the ones that hold your teeth or make the spaces for the teeth. Good. Same happens right here. Remember, zygomatic bone, maxilla bone. The maxilla makes the upper jaw. Now, when we open this, I'm gonna remove. Let me see if I can remove it right here. We remove the mandible, and we see that maxilla from that inferior portion. And we can see in here that the maxilla becomes another structure that makes the roof of your mouth. And that structure is called the palate. Now, you're gonna have a hard palate, and right at the end, made of mostly a soft tissue, becomes the soft palate. So in terms of bones, the hard palate is made, or is a process formed by the maxilla, and it's also split. That's why in situations where they are lacking like folic acid, or they are lacking on time to fuse, you can have that roof of the mouth open in babies. Okay. Now, I also want you to notice another view, or another way to see the ethmoid from the posterior, the inferior and posterior portion. In here, you can see the conchise, the nasal conchise, the superior and inferior nasal conchise, and we also can see the superior portion of the septum created by that ethmoid. Another view also for the foramen magnum, the foramen ovale, the foramen lacerum, and the one that I don't see in here very well because it's tiny one is the foramen spinosum that should go along that space around right here. Okay, and remember also these ones are part of the temporal, that is the stylo process, and the mastoid. Something significant surrounding this foramen magnum, and we're gonna try to see them the best we can, is that on the sides you're gonna have some very smooth surfaces created by mostly friction, and those smooth surfaces are the ones that are gonna contact the segment, the first segment, the first cranial segment that goes over here. And those smooth surfaces are called the condyles. So they are called the occipital condyles. You have a left and a right, and the C1 or the atlas gonna be leaning right on top. Now another point to see in here is that hole in the orbits. The orbits, this is the anterior portion. I hope you can appreciate it. And that hole right there, it goes with a bone that is called the lacrimal bone, and that one is called the lacrimal duct. When we look at our orbits in here, we have an kind of a space, like a cave, that is called the lacrimal fossa. And the lacrimal gland, which is a gland that produces tears, gonna be located, placed in that area. So it produces the tears that runs all the way towards that lacrimal duct. And that one drainage everything. That lacrimal duct gonna also get inside the nasal cavity. That's why when you cry very profusely, you're gonna start involving the nasal cavity and get full of mucus in that area.